I'm Susie Crew and I'm a client director in the European Insurance Tax Practice. And this is Alessia, who's a client specialist in my team as well. We're 3 teams, predominantly looking after 100 clients each. So Alessia's in my team and we look after 100 insurers. And the other 2 teams look after about 100 insurers each as well.
Yeah, so we're going to start our breakout session with a little game. We will test your knowledge on Italian history, geography, nature. We will see a few questions. Then before getting into the details of the Italian reporting, we will have a look at some background information. So we go through the main pieces of legislation relevant for Italian IPT. We will look at the general principles and the deadlines that the insurance company have to meet next year. Before going into the reporting details, we will have a look at the prepayment and the application. The basic reporting requirement is the audit book, which is a ledger that should be maintained regularly by the insurance company, and that it could come handy in case of an audit. Then we will have a look at the 5 W's of the Italian reporting requirements. So we will have a look at the contract and premium report, claim report, and motor report. And we will analyze who is required to submit those reports, what kind of information, which software to use, when to submit, and which software to use. Those reports, a single insurance company may find itself to submit all of these 3 reports, resulting in a significant administrative burden, because as we will see, the quantity and quality of the information to collect, as well as the submission deadlines and method of submissions, are different from report to report.
Who remembers this game? I used to love this game. History, art, science, etc. So let's have a little go at Trivial Pursuit in Italy.
So let's kick off with a question on sport. How many times has the Italian football team won the FIFA World Cup? Any of you any idea? You know that one.
3? Any other offers other than 3? 2. Right, no one's getting a piece of pie. 4. 1934, 1938, 1982, 2006. And interestingly, the world wasn't such an easy place to travel in 1930. They couldn't make it to Uruguay, as did some other European teams also didn't make it to Uruguay.
Next question is on history, which is more on law than history, but does any of you know when the IPT legislation was passed in Italy?
Alberto, if you don't know, I'd be very worried. These 2 chaps in the front are Italian compatriots, our service providers in Italy we work closely with. So when clients have regularizations to make, these 2 guys are our people on the ground in Italy. So they definitely know when the Italian IPT law was passed, which was 1961.
Well done.
Okay.
Yeah. Next question on geography. There are 2 independent states within Italy. What are their names and if they have an IPT regime?
Vatican City.
Yeah, that's one. The other ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do they
Do
have
they have
an
an IPT regime? So let's look at this one. San Marino and Vatican City. IPT has been effective in San Marino since the 1st of December 2013. And we could do a whole other session on San Marino, but San Marino is a little Italy. It's adopted many of the similar concepts in the Italian legislation. And there's lovely Pope, and as far as we know, there is no IPT in Vatican City.
Next question on science and nature. Which Italian scientists argue that the Earth revolved around the Sun and not the other way around?
Galileo.
Yes.
Louder, louder.
Galileo Galilei. And this man lived from 1564 to 1642. He received an apology when he had passed away 350 years before for being imprisoned in his own house, as it was seen as heretic. I think that's the right way to say. his scientific concepts were not approved by the Catholic Church.
Last question, which art form has a specific mention in Italian IPT legislation with its own risk class and its own rate?
Film production. Industrial film production attracts the highest rate of IPT in Italy. I think it's the 1960s that the film industry was seen as quite important in Italy and to be protected. But that's the whole thing, the Italian legislation being so old and still having these different risk classes. It seems a strange concept to us now to be protecting the film industry in Italy, and I think maybe Alberto will probably agree the reason why we'd like to see a revamp of the Italian legislation.
So, let's start putting into context the Italian reporting requirement. IPT pure insurance premium tax was introduced in the 1961 with the law number 1216. Although this is a quite old legislation, a quite old law, this has been amended during the years by several decrees. The last change was in December 2014 when the reporting requirements of freedom of service insurer was aligned with the domestic insurers. So until last year, freedom of service insurance company had to submit monthly returns, make monthly payments, while the domestic insurer were required to submit an annual return but still making monthly payments. From premiums collected in 2015, now also the freedom of service insurers are required to submit an annual return. The annex of the legislation provides a list of specific risks, and each risk will have its own rate. It has been proven very difficult to try to map those risks with the 18 classes of business set out by the first European directive. And there are speculations that the legislation may be changed in order to harmonize a little bit more with the rest of Europe. In 2015, the legislative decree 209 introduced the insurance code, and this instituted the Road Accident Victims Fund and the Hunting Accident Victims Fund, and also introduced the SSN contribution. The first two funds are both overseen by a body named CONSAP, and this is basically the aim of those funds is basically to provide public reinsurance to citizens. So in case of a road accident or a hunting accident, the victim of the accident can apply to CONSAP and obtain a public compensation. The contribution to those funds are borne by the insurance company, and they are both paid annually. The Road Accident Victims Fund contributions apply to classes 10 and 12, therefore compulsory motor and marine third-party liability, while the hunting accident, as the name says, applies to hunting liability. The SSN contribution is, it aims to subsidize the National Health Service, as the name says, Servizio Sanitario Nazionale, National Health Service. This is borne by the insured, not by the insurance company, and it's 10.5% of premiums collected on compulsory motor and marine third-party liability. This is paid monthly and declared annually together with IPT. As well as the SSN contribution, also the anti-racket is borne by the insurance, by the insured. This was actually the first parafiscal charge introduced by the legislator, and it's 1% additional IPT on policies covering general liability, theft, fire, and motor hull risks. Anti-racket as well is paid monthly and declared annually. A last mention is for Legislative Decree 68 of 2011. For many years in Italy there have been talks about implementing a pure fiscal federalism, but this hasn't been really done. Some taxes have been deemed to be provincial, and one of those is insurance premium tax on motor third-party liability policies. In fact, the decree established that those tax was going to be provincial, then the default rate should have been 12.5%, but then it gave authority to each of the 110 Italian provinces to change the rate. This could be increased or decreased by a maximum of 3.5%. So there will be provinces with a 9% IPT, other provinces with 16%. How do the insurance company know to which province to pay, which rate to apply? Well, what it triggers the application is the province where the vehicle is registered. So if the policyholder, even if he's resident in Rome, if he has registered his car in Milan, then the IPT will need to be paid to the Milan province with 16% IPT applicable.
How often are those rates
They're not reviewed often, but being there 110 provinces during the year, there may be 4 or 5 changes in different provinces.
So we try to update those rates monthly for those rates to try and look after the changes there. Okay, so just to talk about some general principles for IPT in Italy. The taxable basis is 100% of the premium, and it should include additional fees. The rates in Italy vary from 0, so exempt, up to 21.25, and there's some main rates in there, 7.5, 12.5 rates. In terms of co-insurance, the rule is that the leader of the policy should be paying the IPT. However, in practice, we find that the tax office is happy to accept taxes from wherever they come. So if it is split amongst the co-insurers, it seems to be working fine, as in market practice. Reinsurance is exempt from IPT. So if the first layer is already paid for, there is no tax. But if there hasn't been tax paid, then the tax is still due. Negatives is a pretty important point to be making in Italy. So the tax point in Italy is cash received. On that basis, then the policy is alive, and there should be no refund of tax in case of a policy cancellation. In fact, paragraph 4 of the legislation says there will be no refund of tax in case of policy cancellation for any reason. The only permissible negatives in Italy would be for accounting types of adjustments.
So let's have a look at next year's calendar, what the insurance company need to do. As far as the current liabilities are concerned, monthly payments will need to be made for IPT, anti-racket and SSN contribution. The tax point in Italy is collection date, so if the premium is collected in January, the corresponding tax should be settled by the end of February, so by the end of the following month. The only exemption is for November liability, which needs to be settled by the 20th of December, so we don't need to work during Christmas. If we arrive in May, then there are 3 additional deadlines. So first of those is the 2017 prepayment to be paid by the 16th of May 2016, which, as we will see, is based on 2015 tax liability. The next deadline will be for the submission of the annual return by the end of May, and this will include all the premiums collected during 2015. Integral part of the return will be the motor report. So all the policy that needs to be reported under the motor report legislation will be included in the annual return, and therefore the deadline will be the end of May 2016. The other 2 reports, the contract and premium reporting, will be due by the end of February. The deadline was moved forward in December 2014, so starting from premiums collected in 2014, the report needs to be submitted by the end of February. It used to be the end of April, so the insurance company had more time to prepare the report. The 2015 claim report will then need to be submitted by the end of April 2016. It was mention of deadlines for road accident victims fund and anti-accident victim funds. In January 2016, an interim payment for 2016 will need to be made, and in September 2016, the 2015 balancing payment is to be settled to Consa.
So, the prepayment, everyone's favorite Italian item. Prepayment is based on 40% of the IPT in the previous year, excluding any motor liability, and it can only be offset against IPT. Often clients say to us, what if my business level reduces? Well, the Italian legislation doesn't allow for it. It still requires a 40% amount to be paid, and that amount is carried forward. We have some good news though on prepayment. We've been successful in the last few months in reclaiming 440,000 euros for a French insurer who has gone into runoff. So it is possible, hurrah, to get your prepayment back. On the flip side though, what happens if you've underpaid? Bad things happen if you underpay. We had a Swiss insurer, which I'm sure all these guys over here remember, had mixed up their domestic and their freedom of service data together. There was an underpayment on one entity and overpayment on the other. The underpaid entity suffered a penalty of 30%. So they had underpaid 30,000 euros on the prepayment, which was seemed very tough that they got a 9,000 euro penalty for taxes which are essentially paid in advance. Many of our clients find that the prepayment a really tough item to be dealing with, but it's the legislation.
So how to calculate prepayment? For the 2017 prepayment due in May 2016, the current rate is 40% of 2015 tax liability, but it's not all the tax liability for the previous year. In fact, we will need to take the total IPT due and paid during 2015, add the anti-racket contribution paid, but deduct the IPT on motor third-party liability. The prepayment paid in May 16 can be utilized starting from January 2017, so current liability is starting from the beginning of the year, but be careful because this cannot be used against anti-racket or again the motor third-party liability IPT. The payment is made as usual using with the same methodology that we settle IPT and anti-racket, using the F24 CISE form.
Okay, here's what you all came for, the actual reporting. So the first ledger, shall we say, is the IPT book. This is a record that should be kept monthly. You need to be keeping it in order of your premiums received. On the next slide, we'll go through each of the data fields that should be recorded. It needs to match exactly pretty much your tax return and your F24 payments. And it is going to be something that the tax officer will request in case of any queries or indeed any tax office audits. So here's the IPT book template. It's very small, but hopefully it's a bit clearer on your handheld slides. Each of the fields that you need to keep in your IPT book. Just to say, if you are an outsourcing client of ours, if you're filling in your data fields on your bordereaux that we give you, we are keeping this for you. So we're compiling this. So you need to record obviously the insurer name, the insured name, the insured address, the insurance policy number, the inception date of the policy, and the expiry date of the policy. You need to record the risk covered and when the premium was cashed, and this is what's driving the order of events in this book. So you will also need to record the premium cash, the IPT rate applied, the IPT collected and paid over, and the anti-racket, and also the emergency fund. The book should be ruled off to the end of every month, reconciled back to the amounts that have gone on the bordereau to the tax return, and keep sort of rolling forward. The only items that you can possibly be adjusting on here will be accounting adjustments, obviously as there is no refund of tax. Okay, so I think that's the IPT book. If anyone's got any questions at this point or going forward, please feel free to interrupt.
So,
Yeah?
Is the prepayment mandatory? We don't do it at all.
Yes,
it's
absolutely mandatory.
It's provided by the legislation. It's an obligation provided by the law.
If you're not doing, if you remember I mentioned a Swiss insurer who'd underpaid prepayment, penalty is 30%. It's seen as a payment infringement, and the penalty for that is 30%. So yeah, definitely need to be making a prepayment. For clients that we've identified with underpaid prepayments, we tend to correct the past. So we will open up all the past periods, figure out what should have been paid, and pay them with
Reduced penalties.
reduced penalty.
And the 1% also is called anti-racket. What's that? Is it mafiosi or something?
It's not to fund mafiosi, but it's to help the victims of mafiosi. It's the contribution that I was talking earlier. It's a fund that is used to compensate victims of
All
usually
policies, all types of policies.
only
marine
on
operating.
liability, theft, fire, and motor hull. So it's only on these specific risks.
So moving on away from IPT book now, we're going to move on to the next reporting.
Yeah. So the first report to submit next year will be the contract and premium reporting. These used to be two separate reports. So there was one for the contract reporting. There was one related to contracts and one related to the premiums collected during the year. This has been, thankfully, recently consolidated in just one submission. So who is required to submit this report? An insurance company or any other entity or body that is issuing insurance contract with the exemption of liability and assistance. Within the liability umbrella, motor and marine third-party liability is included. The information to report are basically the details of the premiums collected during the year, but also the details of the policy order in respect of any coverage in force during the year. So it will apply not only to new policies issued during the year, but also to policy that expired, policy that have been amended, cancelled, or policy that are covering more than 12 months that were issued in previous year and are still in due course during the year. The software to use for the submission is the SID channel or SID channel. Probably you've heard about this. It was a bit of a nightmare at the time. This method has been introduced since last year, I believe. The SID channel is basically a system that was implemented by the Italian Revenue for exchanging data with public entity or private companies. The registration to the SID channel needs to be made in the name of the company legal representative. So fiscal reps or any other intermediary cannot submit the report on behalf of the insurance company. The report must be in the name of the insurance company legal representative. The registration procedure may be quite long and complex depending on the situation of the insurance company, because it is required to open an Italian legal mail. The legal representative has to have an Italian fiscal code, and if this isn't in place yet, it will need to be made from scratch, and it may take weeks to complete.
I've got a question.
Yes.
What's an Italian fiscal code?
I was going to this later, but yes, the Italian fiscal code is basically a tax ID. It's a unique code and it's given to individuals at birth and to companies when they start trading. For VAT chargeable person, it would be the same. The fiscal code would be also the VAT registration number. It is a very important piece of information as it's mainly used for tax purposes, but it may be required to finalize, to do some specific transactions provided by the legislation. One aspect to consider is that the law provides for the fiscal code to be shown in all of the policy documents, especially in the contract that is signed by the policy holder. So it is very important for insurance company to collect this piece of information at point of sale, firstly because it needs to be in the contract, and secondly because it's an information that it is required from any Italian report. And if it's not there, the report will be rejected and penalties may be applicable. The submission deadline, as I said, is the 28th of February of each year in respect of the previous calendar year, and as I said, until 2013, the deadline was the end of April. 2013 report to be submitted in 2014. What is the purpose of the report? It's basically to facilitate the tax authority compliance checks. So they will go to the policyholder tax return, it will be an individual owner or a business, and they will match the information received from the insurance company with the information shown in the return. As well, they will verify if the policyholder is actually entitled to claim tax relief on that premium. It was mentioned penalties, as I said, if an inaccurate report or the report is submitted late or if it's not submitted at all. The legislation provides for penalties ranging from a minimum of 200 to a maximum of 5,000 for non-life policies. For life contracts, we are aware of penalties of 100 euros per line. So if you submit 100 lines and 50 of them are wrong, you will have 5,000 euros of penalties. We are not aware to date of any penalties issued, probably because it's some relatively new reporting, so the tax authority may be a little bit more sympathetic with insurance companies, so they try not to be that strict. But obviously this may change going forward as soon as they consider that if enough time has gone and the insurance company should be required to know what they're supposed to do and when. So if we move to the next slide, thank you, Susie. We have summary of the information to be reported, and this can be divided into the policyholder information and policy information. So for the policyholder, as I said, the fiscal code is required, the name in case of an individual, or the identification data of the company. While for the policy, the insurance company are required to report identification data, basically. So the policy number, the expiry date of the policy, the premium collected, and the class of business. We have included a template, which again we have divided into two parts. This is a template that is valid for non-life business, as for life policies or policies covering the risk of death or accident. Further details are required. If we have a look, therefore, at the first part, this relates to the contractor, which is basically the policyholder. If it's an individual, the full name is required, as well as the date and place of birth. While for policyholder which are businesses, the registered name and registered address should be reported. Again, the fiscal code is a very important information that is required. If the policyholder is an individual or business, it's not really relevant. It needs to be provided. In the second part, the insurance company are going to provide information on the policy. So as you can see at the first column, we will have the policy number, and then we continue with the date when the contract was signed by the policyholder. If the premium paid is eligible for tax relief, so this would be the case of life contract, death or accident contract. The mixed policy column is relevant only for life policies, so we will ignore it for now. The date when, basically the expiry date of the policy, how long is the coverage offered by the policy, the total premium related to the contract, so it won't be just the premium collected during the year, but it's the full premium linked to the policy. The premium paid equal to 0 column is a check digit. If no premium was paid during the year, then a specific digit will have to be entered in this column. This is because the policy information needs to be reported even if no premium was collected by the insurance company. So the collection of the premium is not relevant as long as you have a policy valid during the year. The tax authority wants to have the information related to that company. It may be that the premium was due but it wasn't paid, it's not relevant. I want to know the details of the policy. And then we finish the part related to the policy with the risk covered by the contract.
Okay, so that's the end of contract and premium reporting. We next move on to claims reporting. Who needs to be making claims reporting? Again, it's the insurance companies, intermediaries, and the other operators in the insurance industry. there is an exemption there for those paying on behalf of foreign insurers established in Italy. What needs to be reported? Well, it's amounts paid, and here the tax office is trying to track where has the money gone. Has there been a claim that's gone to an accident repair centre? Has there a claim gone to a particular policyholder? Which software is used, as opposed to the SID channel for premium and contract reporting. This can be input on Entratel or Fisc Online. And Elliot here in the front row has been looking after claims reporting for our clients and been able to successfully submit sometimes some very large reports in Italy for the claims reporting on Entratel or Fisc Online. When's the deadline? The deadline is 30th of April each year, and it's in respect of January to December of the year before. Why does the tax office want this information? It's so they can track the flow of funds. They're wanting to stop tax evasion, and they're really looking to assess those receiving the funds for their taxes due. They're using the insurance industry to garner that knowledge. Sorry.
Is this a new requirement?
No.
I think it was introduced in 2007, if I'm right, around that time.
It's new for some years.
I've never done it, but I don't know if someone else has done it in. Oh,
You may have, if you have potentially an Italian business in Italy, they may be doing it for you.
right, I'll check.
Just to say, this is really well outside the scope of IPT, and it's something that we're assisting clients with in addition to our core service of IPT outsourcing.
Okay.
So don't feel too worried if you
You've never
haven't
done
done
it.
it. Maybe someone else is actually doing it for you.
It would be just for a recipient of the claim that are resident in Italy. So even if the risk is, I don't know, not sure, but even if the policyholder is not in Italy, maybe that the claimant is. So it's something to watch out for.
If you haven't got a fiscal code, you haven't got anything to report.
Right.
If there isn't someone holding a fiscal code, that tax ID Alessia mentioned earlier, an Italian individual, an Italian resident company who has a fiscal code. In fact, you can have Swiss with Italian fiscal code if they have a holiday home. Someone who's got an Italian fiscal code, that's the only way you've got a reportable line.
Right, okay.
In general, liability and assistance are excluded from the contract, from the consortiums. No.
Okay. These are quite powerful reports. Just thinking about a different presentation that we do on audits, Italy, out of all of the tax offices that we can see across Europe, are garnering some pretty strong data there for them to assess any underpaid taxes. So yeah, quite powerful, but I would say potentially underutilized at the moment. Maybe in years to come, they will become more sophisticated with the use of this report. So going down to the actual data fields that you'll need for the claim reporting. You hopefully have a unique claim number. In terms of the beneficiary receiving the claim, their name, their fiscal code, the amount paid, and the date of payment. If a third party, for example, the example given, the accident repair centre, the third party details, again, the fiscal code, amount paid, the date paid, and what service was supplied.
Yeah. So we arrived at the last of the report to be submitted. This will be due by the end of May, and as I said before, it's integral part of the return. So it will be submitted via Entratel or Fisc Online, which is a software provided by the Italian revenues for the submission of returns or communications required. The motor reporting is due by insurance company that are writing compulsory motor third party liability. As I said earlier, the IPT on this kind of product is to be paid to each single province where the vehicle is registered. So the main purpose of this report is to collect information of the amount paid to each province during the previous year, and then to trying to match up with what was actually paid. And this will facilitate the controls and the checks of the provinces to find out any non-compliance behavior or if they were expecting more revenues than they actually had. The information to report, again, are quite detailed. And if we have a look at the template, this is the main template to populate for the motor report. Each page of the report must be dedicated to a single province, so potentially there may be 110 pages to fill in. For each province, then the premium collected during the previous calendar year needs to be reported by contract, also by vehicle. So if the policy covers more than one vehicle in case of a fleet, the premium must be split by vehicle. As you can see, the plate is required to be reported to the authorities. Also, if the vehicle is registered in a different province, then that premium will have to be reported in a different page. Each vehicle will have to be reported on a separate line. So if we go and have a look at the information required, sorry. Can I have the template, please? Thank you. Yes.
Sorry.
So for each province, we will have to report the policy number, again, the fiscal code of the policy holder. As you can see, this is information that comes back in each report. Exceptional cases is a key, it's a check digit to be entered in case the policy covers more than one vehicle. Then we have the plate of the vehicle, the premium, the IPT rate, and the IPT that was due on that policy, and then that was settled to the province. And a quick mention on the IPT rate. Remember, this can be different from province to province because they have the authority to increase or decrease the rate by a maximum of 3.5%. It may also happen that the rate was changed during the year, and then a different page will have to be filled in for premiums subject to that new rate.
Now provinces were abolished, but it still applies.
Yeah.
Okay, that pretty much concludes our presentation, but has anyone got any questions or any worries that we can help with?
Well, yeah.
Worries?
So on the claims fund, that's news to me as well.
The claims reporting. We can share some more stories about SID registration if no one's got any questions. So the SID registration is a 7-step process. You can probably talk better through this bit than me.
Yeah, it's very complicated because, as Susie was explaining before, differently from all other tax obligations, it is not the fiscal representative which is in charge of this obligation, but it is the legal representative of the company itself. So the legal representative is normally a foreign person which needs to be registered into the Italian system with the tax ID, and needs to have a digital signature which is made through a special card, physical card, which has to be inserted into a special device. So as you can see, and each legal representative of each company has to have one of these things. To have these, you have to fill different forms to apply for different specific, I don't know how to say, but different specific things. And so there are very different steps to have a legal mail, which is a sort of
Secure email system with the revenue.
yes, exactly. It is a mean of communication which is recognized officially, and so there are many steps to be followed, and so it can be long. So our suggestion is that if you don't have already the SID application, to do it very quickly, to apply very quickly, because the deadline is the 28th of February, which is tomorrow, and in order to apply to it, maybe 2 months are necessary. And so if you don't, my suggestion is to contact them and do it.
So in terms of the 100 clients that we look after in Italy, maybe 80 of them existed before the SID channel came along. For the brand new ones, as we registered them, we added the SID channel straight away. But for the older ones, we've been doing them as requested and as they've needed it to be doing these reports.
If we enter a country in 2016, our company probably will go in Italy from May next year. So it means we have to start all the administrative part.
The earlier the better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any other questions? Any more stories from Elliot?
Some fun stories.
Sure. What is the view of the tax regulators in respect of non-admitted insurance?
Non-admitted outside Europe or European?
No.
Non-admitted outside Europe, not permitted.
Yes, I know it's not permitted in insurance, and I know it's very clear, the regulation is there to explain that. But if people did it anyway, and an insurer were to say to their clients, no, I promise I will be very compliant fiscal-wise.
From as far as we know, the Italians don't welcome the tax or welcome the
But
insurance
they
business.
kind of whistle-blow to the insurance regulators that there is something fishy going on.
There is a general rule, but which does not apply to IPT. This is a very specific case, which say that also for illegal activities, tax is due.
But you see, that's why I was asking. Some tax authorities are a bit like that, aren't
But
they?
it is something that the specific case should be discussed with the authorities.
Yeah.
There is no a specific law stating what has to be done.
And
But in general,
what will be the status of the policy? Will the policy be deemed invalid? That's the consideration. So the
that's-
policy itself, let's say a
maybe-
Korean insurer has...
maybe it's not valid for the client. It's very
Yeah.
dangerous for the client and
So
for the insurer.
Worst case scenario, certainly not from a legal perspective, but for the client and the insurer that are doing this very naughty activities, the worst case scenario would be that they don't have insurance, so if the claim occurs, there's no possibility of validating that, but they still have to pay tax on it.
Yes, that's the worst scenario, but the worst consequences are on the legal side.
Yes, of course, I understand that.
For another.
Didn't we have a client 3 or 4 years ago who had a large amount collected but we were unable to remit?
We were?
Unable to pay to the tax office. I think. I might, when I get back to the office, I'll look up an old case and I'll email you. Yeah? Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, just in terms of the contract and premium reporting,
Yeah.
the template you provided, is that set out in legislation? Where's that? in the
It
writing?
is. Did we put the legal reference at the beginning?
Maybe not of the.
Or maybe we didn't put it for that report.
No.
If you'd like the legal references for these, we know them, but not completely off the top of our head.
Good. Do you know sort of where that comes in? Kind of what was the date, their expectation? And I think you talked about the fact that there's going to be some lead time, because a lot of looking at this, a lot of this data we just don't have at this point in time. And going out and getting this from policyholders is going to be quite a task.
I'm going to share with you my experience with our clients and where they're at. Many of my London insurers don't have fiscal code. Without fiscal code, there is no report. So their practical response is, okay, I'm going to start collecting it from now on, and I'll make the report when I'm ready. So many of them are going to start making it from next year. Out of the 100 clients that we've had for contracted premium reporting, maybe half have done the reporting, and no one from our books has been penalised for not making it so far. How long that goes on for, I don't know. Probably not too long. I think the Italian tax officers are becoming stronger and more looking for these and expecting them. And
And now the penalties, as Alessio mentioned, are very low, where they just change in the life business and they put this penalty of 100 per line. And so we expect that it will change for another business as well.
Yeah, because these data are used now from last year to match with the data declared from the individuals in order to see if individuals are paying the correct amount of tax. And so this is more and more important for the tax authorities to have the correct data.
Yeah, if we get legislation, that would be good, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I think we're coming up to the time of when we need to move back to the next room. Any
Yeah,
last
5
questions?
minutes.
Or if anything occurs to you, please feel free to email us and we'll do our best to answer. Okay.
Thank
very
you.
much.